Good afternoon, everybody. Anthony Aniano here from RotoBaller Radio and RotoBaller.com with an early look at the Week 10 Fantasy Football Waiver Wire. As always, recording this on Sunday before the Sunday night and Monday night games. That's why it's called the early look at the Waiver Wire. And as we get ready for Week 10, try to keep our players mentioned here at a 50% or less rostership using Yahoo roster percentages. So let's take a look. Just remember now, Week 10, we have 4 teams on a bye. But there are 4 teams with some nice fantasy value. Obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs, Kelsey, Mahomes, Pacheco, Rashee Rice has been a factor in fantasy football this year. The Miami Dolphin offense with wide receivers there, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Raheem Mostert, Tua, Philadelphia Eagles, and all of their offensive firepower. Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, DeAndre Swift, Dallas Goedert, who also got injured and was ruled out with a forearm injury in that Week 9 victory over the Dallas Cowboys. And then the Rams, the running back room has been mediocre, but you have Puka and Cooper Kupp, who struggled this past week without Matthew Stafford. So that being said, we have all of that. We have some other injuries as well. Jaron Hall comes in from Minnesota, leaves quickly with a concussion, paves the way for Josh Dobbs. We have Daniel Jones leaving with a knee, looked bad. That could be a season ender. Cam Akers, running back Minnesota, they're afraid of a second torn Achilles. Forget about season. Does his career ever come back from that? At the wide receiver position, KJ Osborne of Minnesota with a concussion. Josh Palmer goes on the injured reserve list for the Chargers with a knee over the course of the weekend. Christian Watson leaves the game for the Green Bay Packers, and I mentioned Dallas Goedert with the forearm at the tight end position. So we do have some injuries, we have some bye weeks, and we go from there. So let's start at the quarterback position here. If you need a quarterback for Week 10 of your fantasy football season, 3 names to keep an eye on. Joshua Dobbs is the first one from the Minnesota Vikings. He's been there only a couple of days, was traded on the trade deadline Tuesday. They did not plan on playing him this week. Jaron Hall was supposed to play. He gets hurt. Dobbs comes in, and Dobbs looks fantastic. Goes 20 of 30, 67% of his passes completed, 158 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and then runs for 66 yards and a rushing touchdown, finishing with 28.9 fantasy points in a 6-point per passing touchdown format. He's got 4 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns in his last 2 games. One of those games was with Arizona, and now one with the Minnesota Vikings. And Minnesota keeps winning. Josh Dobbs is going to be the guy at the steering wheel for this team. Jordan Addison. Eventually they get Justin Jefferson back. Now they did lose Osborne and Alexander Madison now without the competition of Cam Akers. But Dobbs is going to try to get them into the postseason. He's only 16% rostered. Goes against the New Orleans Saints in Week 10. Also available at the quarterback position, Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A resurgent year for Baker Mayfield. Has him at 48% rostered. He's got 5 games this season of 20 or more fantasy points where touchdown passes count for 6 points. He goes 20 of 29, 250, and 2 touchdowns, both of them to tight end Cade Otton in Week 9, 22.4 fantasy points. Next week, the Tampa Bay Bucs go up against the Tennessee Titans. Baker Mayfield has been more consistent than any other quarterback on the list today. I just prefer Dobbs slightly because of Dobbs' running ability. And then number 3, Will Levis is still available in about 55% of Yahoo leagues. He's rostered in 45% of leagues. Thursday night, he did throw for 262, 22 of 39. Didn't get in the end zone through the air and did throw 1 interception. He finished with just under 9 fantasy points. Goes up against that Tampa Bay defense and Baker Mayfield. So Will Levis would be a third choice if you have not already invested in him. Now, running back room, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking running backs, simply because it was nobody for me who I'm going to use a waiver claim in or spend fab on other than Keaton Mitchell, the rookie from the Baltimore Ravens. Only 3% rostered. Now, people have waited for him, and I'm in leagues where he's already rostered. I have him in rookie, where I was able to add him in dynasty formats, expecting Mitchell to become something, especially after the J.K. Dobbins injury, and then you waited for Keaton Mitchell to come off of IR. Well, he's off, and he was active. Now, Gus Edwards isn't going anywhere. Gus Edwards, 5 carries, 52 yards, 2 touchdowns. I still expect Gus Edwards to be the quote-unquote lead back and getting the goal line work. Where Keaton Mitchell can take over is the Justice Hill work. Justice Hill went 13 carries for 40 yards in Week 9. Keaton Mitchell, 9 carries, 138 yards, showing a speed and explosiveness that neither Hill nor Edwards show. He adds a different dynamic to that Baltimore Raven ground attack. And you know they're going to try to run it. That's all they try to do. Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, Lamar Jackson, obviously, and now add Keaton Mitchell to the mix. 9 carries, 138 yards, and a touchdown, 20.4 PPR points for the rookie. Tough defense next week, the Cleveland Browns. They were great this week, but that was against Arizona. This is a different ballgame against that Ravens offense. I still expect Gus Edwards to be the 1A. Expect Keaton Mitchell to become that 1B, that speed back that the Ravens did not have before Mitchell emerged. Okay? At the wide receiver position, we have some wide receivers to add. And remember, we're losing guys like Rashee Rice, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. That's 7 off the top of my head that are out of commission because of bye weeks. Josh Palmer's on the IR. Christian Watson, who hasn't been effective anyway, but he got hurt. KJ Osborne had a concussion. So you might be down some wide receivers here. So, Tank Dell. We got to talk about Tank Dell first. 48% rostered. I didn't think I'd be talking about him because I honestly did not realize his rostership was below 50%. But there it was. In that magical game by the Houston Texans, C.J. Stroud emerging himself or cementing himself as possibly who I think now a top 12 quarterback going forward. Tank Dell, 48% rostered, 6 catches on 11 targets, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns, 29.6 fantasy points. Now, we loved Tank Dell earlier in the season when he had his first 2 20-plus point fantasy games. Got injured, concussion, kind of people dropped him, had to move on, and now he hasn't recovered rostership-wise as he's still on the 50%. He's a must-add going forward. Anything you can get right now with this Houston offense is an intriguing option, in the passing game at least. Goes against Cincinnati. We know how good the Cincinnati pass defense is. But Tank Dell, my top wide receiver ad of the week. And just to break it down, Tank Dell had 11 targets. Tight end Dalton Schultz had 11 targets. Noah Brown had 6. And Nico Collins had 5. All 4 of them, getting part of the passing touchdown explosion from C.J. Stroud. My number 2 wide receiver ad of the week, Demario Douglas of the New England Patriots. I liked him in my sleeper and value play video over the weekend. He delivered 5 for 55 on 7 targets. I love the target number. He's got 20 targets in his last 3 games, okay, and 10 or more fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3, emerging as Mac Jones's go-to receiver with the injury to Kendrick Bourne. He's only 35% rostered, goes up against the Indianapolis Colts in Week 10. At number 3, and I usually don't do this, but I'm going to mention it, Quentin Johnson of the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm recording this Sunday. He's playing the Jets Monday night, and I'm not really overly concerned about what that performance looks like against the New York Jets. I'm honestly not. The reason I'm adding Quentin Johnson as my number 3 wide receiver ad of the week right now is because the path to playing time has been cleared even more, right? We saw Josh Palmer elevate with the injury to Mike Williams. Well, now Josh Palmer is on IR. Somebody else in that Charger offense needs to be a consistent wide receiver too, opposite Keenan Allen. Quentin Johnson, logic says, should be the next guy up, the first-round pick. I know he struggled. People have complained about his ability to know the playbook, to run routes. Quentin Johnson has an opportunity to emerge in that offense with Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler. He's only 25% rostered on Yahoo. Let's see how he does Monday night. And by the time you're watching this, you will know how he did Monday night. And hit me up on Twitter at Aniano Fantasy for more input on that. But I'll put in for Quentin Johnson strictly because of the path to playing time emerging with the Josh Palmer injury. At number 4, I mentioned him briefly earlier, Noah Brown of the Houston Texans. Okay, 6 catches on 6 targets, 157 yards and a touchdown in that Houston Texans victory. 27.7 fantasy points going against the Bengals. Now, I don't love the fact he's the number 3 wide receiver and really 4th maybe target option when you include Dalton Schultz, the tight end. But without much of a running game in Houston, they're letting C.J. Stroud throw the ball all over the field. Could be a shootout next week against the Bengals. And Noah Brown in his last 3 games does have 16 targets, essentially giving you 5 targets per game over his last 3. And finally, my 5th wide receiver I wanted to mention, Brandon Powell of the Minnesota Vikings. He caught that touchdown late from Josh Dobbs. Only 2 catches, 15 yards, and that touchdown. 3 targets. He's only 2% rostered. However, if KJ Osborne were to miss some time because of the concussion, Brandon Powell could emerge as the second wide receiver opposite the rookie Jordan Addison. He's a reach. He's only 2% rostered, similar to Noah Brown, as both of those players are available in 98% of leagues. Now, at the tight end position, we got to maybe deal with a Dallas Goedert injury. We're losing Kelsey. He's the big loss at the tight end position. Those are the 2 big losses. So 2 players to keep in mind. Jonnu Smith of the Atlanta Falcons, 28% rostered. Newsflash, he's the best tight end on the Falcons. It's not Kyle Pitts. Jonnu Smith goes 5 catches, 100 yards on 6 targets, touchdown, including the big one. 4 games with 10 or more fantasy points this season for Jonnu Smith. Kyle Pitts, he only has 2 of those games. Jonnu Smith has outplayed him. Tyler Heineke looked for him 6 times this past week, and he will continue to look for him. And a good matchup this week for that Falcon offense against the Arizona Cardinals. And number 2, Cade Otton of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, having his best game of the season. 9 targets, 6 catches, 67 yards, 2 touchdowns, 24.7 fantasy points. Cade Otton is only 5% rostered. He's got 21 targets in his last 3 games. So Cade Otton's averaging 7 targets per game over his last 3. That's what you want to see out of the tight end position, is those looks. He's getting those looks over the last couple of weeks, and he goes against the Tennessee Titans in Week 10. So to recap, my top 5 ads for Week 10 of the fantasy football season. Number 5, tight end, Jonnu Smith, Atlanta Falcons. Number 4, Quentin Johnson, wide receiver, Los Angeles Chargers. At number 3, Keaton Mitchell of the Baltimore Ravens, running back. You can move him up if you need a running back more than a wide receiver. But if you need wide receiver help, number 2, Demario Douglas of the New England Patriots. And number 1, Tank Dell, wide receiver, Houston Texans. All right, everybody, go to RotoBaller.com. Sign up for any premium pass right now. Use the promotional code ACES. Download the app. It's free. Premium, season-long format, DSPS, whatever you're looking for, the RotoBaller app has you covered. Please like and subscribe right here to the RotoBaller YouTube channel. Give me a follow on Twitter at @AnianoFantasy, and we will see you next time right here on RotoBaller Radio.